Hello everybody. Welcome back to the channel where we talk about stuff. Don't forget to leave a like on the video. It is a free and easy way to support the channel. We are currently in what I like to call what the actual fudge is currently happening with the world. One of the largest indicators for me personally, and this is why I keep making sure to reiterate this all the time within the cryptocurrency space, if I can be honest, is just how much attention and adoption for the space that we're constantly getting over and over. I think a lot of people in crypto look over this quite often because it doesn't mean a lot to them, and it doesn't have to do with prices. This is something that we had to learn about years ago. I've been into crypto. I've had these channels since around 2016, more or less. And you eventually learn that prices aren't everything. And I know that sounds crazy because a lot of people just care about the prices. But one of the things that you actually do end up paying more attention to is actual adoption. Who's doing what with and how. It's kind of like years ago. There were a number of altcoins who shall not be named, who basically kept on announcing that they had partnerships and that they were having an upgrade and an update, and this was going to happen on chain, and then none of these things ended up happening, and they kind of dragged people along for years and years and years talking about these projects. The difference is that when it comes to Bitcoin, and I dare say XRP and Ether, but now we're just focusing on Bitcoin, a lot of the discussion recently has been around accumulation and actual usage. We've had some usage videos where people are trying to get people into the idea of using Bitcoin more, not in use it right now, but in the future as being like an actual means of exchange. When we keep seeing all these companies and all these institutions getting into the space, but then prices on that day go down, you can see that people end up leaving the market. But also these are always and I don't care for the term weak hands, it sounds ridiculous. But these are the people who never really wanted to be in the market. They were just kind of in the market for the quick, easy, fast money. One of the narratives for Bitcoin since the beginning of Bitcoin time has revolved around the idea of Bitcoin actually taking over fiat currencies. A lot of times if you hear me say, and you've heard me say, I wish more people researched Bitcoin and knew more about it. It's cool to be in Bitcoin, but if you don't know what you're investing in, what's the point of you actually being in it? It's kind of like you buying real estate and not understanding what wood is and how what rental income would actually be. Part of the thing for Bitcoin has been for us to get away from the old financial system. The one that still is running on a 1970s messaging system that isn't really benefiting anyone except for the rich. So whenever you hear me say over and over, I'm like, I hope everyone paid attention to the news. It's not because I'm just oh yeah, cool news another day. All right, cool, deuces, that kind of thing. No, it's actually because this is monumental news that we're constantly getting. If you get news, as I stated before, in any capacity, even if it was just one symbolically, that the United States is planning on putting money into one Bitcoin as opposed to strengthening their own economy or the US dollar, that's monumental. Nonetheless, the idea that the US is trying to acquire 1 million Bitcoin. Same with all these other states who we've been talking about. If you miss it at any point, it's 26 or 27 states within the United States. We're also working on proposals to also purchase Bitcoin and other crypto for their state as well. That's monumental because they're not essentially putting it into other things in the state that might actually need money. They're shifting it over into Bitcoin instead. When you hear that these gigantic institutions, and I mean if we can just talk about one, BlackRock, is getting into the space, is in the cryptocurrency space, has Bitcoin ETFs. Them and the other ETF issuers have acquired almost 2 million Bitcoin over the course of a 15-month period. That's absolutely spectacular. I mean, first of all, those coins should be in the hands of billions of people on the planet. But as far as accelerated adoption, that's it. That's the kind of thing that we've been looking for a long time. So to actually see this shift in the market and in the mindsets of people and in the mindsets of companies and institutions and also banks who are getting into crypto and who own large amounts of Bitcoin, it's insane. So when you talk about if you don't know the numbers, the US dollar lost 99% of its value to Bitcoin in 10 years. 10 years. Not 11, not 37, not 128 years. 10 years. The US dollar lost 99% of its value to the US dollar. What we currently have right now is what I was telling you all those years ago, and that's also now coming true, and it's a little creepy, is all those people, all the original analysts, like the Andreas Antonopoulos, like all these people from years and years ago, all predicted at some point that not only would inflation get really bad, if you have $1 million and it has a 2% inflation rate, well, it's not that bad. If you have $1 billion and you have a 2% inflation rate, that's a lot of monies. If you have $100 trillion with a 2% inflation, you understand it can. And also, when the inflation rate isn't even 2%, it's far higher than that currently is. You talk about the devaluation of the dollar and the self-devaluation of currencies by countries trying to incentivize people to do business there. A lot of people don't know that. When you talk about inflation, countries aren't really like sad about it. It makes it the country more attractive to do business in. Remember how last year and maybe the year before, we had a lot of news about people like going, you must have seen it, going to Japan and hanging out in Japan. If you have social media or have a friend, somebody you know went to Japan, or someone on social media who you follow was in Tokyo, was in Osaka, and all these other kinds of things. Do you know why? Because Japan is working on and has been working on devaluing their currency. What it does is people look at the exchange rate and they go, I was thinking of going to Bali, but we're going to Tokyo now for 3 weeks. And then everyone ends up going there, and it increases the amount of money that begins to flow through the country. And this is what the United States also has been doing and now has to do right now as well. The major news story, and I really want everyone to understand what this means when these words are actually said. Larry Fink, who is the CEO of BlackRock, announced in the middle of 2023, if you weren't here, there was a really weird news day where something was kind of like leaked to us. We get a lot of like leaked news from like special investors who received this news from these companies. And the news was basically they were told to allocate 70 to 80% of their portfolios into Bitcoin. Bitcoin was $15,000. They got the ETFs approved in January 2024. Bitcoin went from $16,000 to $109,000 after we got news of BlackRock telling people allocate 70 to 80% of their money into Bitcoin. You can find it. Type in 70, 80%. BlackRock Bitcoin, you'll see articles from 2023 beginning to pop up. It was like the craziest thing ever, and no one seemed to care except for when the prices went up and everyone was like, oh, BlackRock, say something, like that kind of thing. This guy has been in the news the last couple of months, and I think people didn't pay attention because prices didn't immediately move. And also because like I think people like keep like expecting like wizardry to happen whenever someone actually speaks, as opposed to looking at the actual long-term trends. He was in the news, Larry Fink, this was a couple of months ago. He was talking about, he thinks that Bitcoin is going to, remember? He said that Bitcoin is going to take over the entire valuation of U.S. real estate. For those of you who don't know, all U.S. real estate is currently valued at $50 trillion. $50 trillion. He thinks within the next 20 or so years that Bitcoin's market cap is going to eclipse and completely go over the entire valuation of U.S. real estate. You could hear a pen drop because most people also didn't care or hear this man saying these words. That's why this one is even crazier. BlackRock CEO, his name is Larry Fink, says the U.S. is risking losing its reserve currency status to Bitcoin. The U.S. dollar is going to lose its reserve currency status to Bitcoin if the United States fails to curb their debt and deficits. My friends, the United States is never going to stop their debts because that's how the system works. A lot of people think that it works on like printing money in a printing machine. No, the entire world works. The entire world works on debt. Do you know why? Remember also 2 years ago, just about, where we had news that Japan was raising their interest rate. For those of you who didn't see it, Japan announced that their interest rate was zero. And they were raising their interest rate to 0.25. And then you saw all the stock markets begin to crash and people were like, it's just a quarter of a point. Do you know why? It's because people were essentially, it was free debt. People were taking, a lot of rich people were taking out billions of dollars in loans from Japan and throwing it into other things that would automatically, or whatever, make them a 5, 6, 7, 8% return on their money. So when they had to pay money back to Japan, they basically paid back the bare minimum that they had to pay while they were making money in other places. Japan raising their interest rate caused markets to drop because all these people were relying on the debt from Japan to fuel other debt-based things that they were also throwing money into. This is why we have and why we need Bitcoin. That's the point of the 2008-2009 crash. And then getting Bitcoin is realizing that the old system is absolute garbage. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink issued a stark warning in his 2025 annual letter to investors, saying that the United States is losing its global reserve status to Bitcoin. He said, and I quote, "If the U.S. doesn't get its debt under control, if the deficits keep ballooning, America risks losing that position to Bitcoin." So I don't really know what more people need to hear in a lot of situations like this. I still am a gigantic believer that people in general need to see $1 million Bitcoin before they actually decide to get into the market or have some kind of conviction for what the future of Bitcoin is going to look like. Even people within the cryptocurrency space, you can hear this news all the time. If after we just heard this, in the next 14 months, if we are at a $625,000 Bitcoin, as we see debt go up, quantitative easing activate, and a whole bunch of money being printed from a number of different countries, and the people still sit here confused. Every time this man has spoken, I've made sure to listen just because it's like, oh yeah, he's probably like on to something there. The amount of Bitcoin on crypto exchanges continues to dwindle. Yeah, that's basically what the news is for today. I don't know what else to really say except for, like, of course, the US dollar is going to continue inflating. But also we're now at the point where the discussions of Bitcoin actually going to several $1 million per coin and taking over valuations for all US real estate and taking over the US dollar. A lot of people predicted and still predict now that we're about 15 to 20 years away from this. So, well, who knows what's going to happen, but probably onto something there. Hope you've all enjoyed. Hope you all are having a great day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, wherever you might be. I do hope it's absolutely fantastic. Thank you all once again for watching, listening, liking, commenting, and supporting, and I will most certainly be talking to you all soon. See you.